Hannah Aldridge, welcome to the Hell Fucking Yeah podcast. I'm very excited to have you here. You want to give me a little bit on your musical background, like where this all started?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of a convoluted story, but yeah. I grew up in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, which is a notably cool music town there. But for me, it wasn't. It didn't really seem that way until I was looking back on it. I can't say that when I was young that made me want to be a musician or anything like that, but.
Mm-hmm.
I was certainly influenced by that. And I was influenced as well by the fact that my dad is a songwriter and producer. And so he worked at Fame Studios my whole life. And so I was around music and around musicians my whole life. And then, kind of in the background, I was classically trained on piano and ballet. And I just always was really artistic and musical in some kind of way.
Yeah.
And then fast forward a little, I decided to take a songwriting course in college as an elective. I knew I loved music, but I wasn't really sure, what I wanted to do with that. So I just enrolled at MTSU in Nashville with a general music degree and took a songwriting course. And by the end of the course, found that I really enjoyed, writing songs. So I continued that pursuit. To the point where one song led to another, and pretty soon I was out playing every night, and then I was touring, and so it just kind of snowballed into this thing,
Yeah.
So yeah, it was kind of weird because I think a lot of people assume that I just came out of the womb, with my parents cheerleading. Music because my dad's a musician and growing up in Muscle Shoals, but that was actually the opposite for me. It really unfolded the opposite direction. So
right. Now your father is Walt Aldridge, correct? He was a singer, songwriter, producer, engineer.
Right.
Wrote dozens of country music hits. There's actually a documentary on Muscle Shoals where you grew up, right?
Yeah. There is. It's a cool documentary. I recommend it to anybody kind of into that era of music,
Yeah, no, I definitely love to check that out. Are you by chance in it?
No, I'm not in it. It really focuses on a guy though named Rick Hall, who was like my father, sort of. My dad worked for him longer than just about anybody could tolerate working. It was many decades. He was renowned for being very difficult to work for. So I was with him almost every day. This guy that the documentary is centered around. And so that all of that documentary centers around the Swampers for the most part, and Rick Hall, which was about a generation or maybe even a half a generation before my dad's time. So my dad, was just interning at this studio, and he would go in at night and pretend like he was locking the door, and he would go back in and record stuff, after
Wow.
he had recording people like Wilson Pickett and the Swampers, all those people. He was in there interning during those records being made. So he wasn't quite in that era to be in that documentary, nor was I either. But certainly all of those people are people that, are friends and people that I grew up around. So they all feel like family to me,
Sure. Oh, that's really cool. I got to check that out. So now growing up in Alabama, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right in the Bible Belt, kind of. Was religion a big part of your upbringing?
Very much so. I always joke and say I was beaten by the Bible Belt. I was raised Church of Christ, which is, borderline Amish with electricity. And it certainly influenced me and had a big impact on my life and my songwriting. I think that's where I really started to delve into the love of Gothic, Southern Gothic and Gothic songwriting, and exploring that the darker side of religion, because it was off limits to me. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, well, I better check that out. And so it's certainly still now. I mean, the first things that you teach someone are the last things that they forget,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess point of teaching them young, So for me, that's something that is really influential to me, as a writer, as a person. And for me, it's somehow translated into really having a love of Gothic storytelling and writing and imagery. So
Sure. Now, I mean, at a very young age, you found yourself exploring dark thoughts and feelings. How old were you about, would you say?
well, I have always been one of the people that I really question the process of everything,
Mhm.
So for me, I was the kid who was always like, but wait a minute, how does that work? In school, or because I went to Church of Christ schools my whole life too. And I was always like, thinking, I'm not sure that I can really get on board with all of this. So I think I struggled kind of from day one with the idea of, having to fit into this box of religion. And ironically, the religion that I was raised in didn't have instruments in the church. So it was all a cappella singing. And I think when I really started to get kind of confused and really, delve into this, trying to sort out what I believe, was maybe in middle school. I went for a couple of years to a non-denominational, very radical, almost Pentecostal school. And my parents were very much against me doing that, but I really wanted to go there. And that really shocked me to my core, because raised so conservative, and then I have people speaking in tongues and snake handling, telling me I'm going to be demon possessed if I don't pray to God right. And so then I was like, well, what is that about? I've never heard of demon possession. What is that? So that kind of sparked a tremendous amount of fear in me, obviously, as a kid, but also some sort of interest in learning about, well, what is the dark side of all of this? So and then it kind of went on from there. I started traveling a lot and studying a lot about all of the different cities and histories and cathedrals and religions, that went into all of the places that I was touring. And it became something that was really fascinating to me, and still even now is just a real trigger point for me to be creative and write about
Right.
that.
Wow. So, I mean, I'm sure at that time it was difficult to express those emotions to anyone. Now it's in your art, it's in your songs, it's in your lyrics. But at that time, were you able to channel those emotions into any kind of creative outlet when you were
Um,
younger?
No, not at all. I was kicked out of the Church of Christ that I went to, and
Wow.
really struggled to communicate to my parents that I was not on board. And I think a lot of that came out in really negative, as it does with kids. It came out in really negative actions on my part. But no, I had a really hard time, because I think, I have a 14-year-old son, and I think, thinking back on it as a parent, every child is different. And for me, I really, putting me in that box of saying, you have to do this and you have to believe this, was probably the exact right way to get me to run as far away from something. So really, when my feet were held to the fire, I ended up just rebelling against the whole thing. And I think that's really hard for any person or child to find a great way to communicate that to the powers that be, that they don't believe whatever the people around them believe.
Sure.
Um, so for me, no, I'm sorry, for me, I was not able to do that in a positive way. But I think even as I got older, it took me a really long time to kind of sort out how to tie that into an art form,
Hmm.
because even now, if I play a show in the South, I mean, I get off on freaking people out a little bit, but it does. It freaks people out, even though I'm 34 years old and I know what I believe and I'm very confident in that. It still freaks people out when you go out
Hmm.
and say a song about demon possession. I mean, that still gets a reaction out of people. So I don't think there would have ever been any way that I could have communicated that well, before I was really sure in what I was trying to say and who I was.
Sure, sure, absolutely. I found this quote online by you that I love, and I'm just going to read it. The devil and darkness were always under the bed for me. It still is, honestly. So that naturally weaves itself into a lot of songs. I find it extremely fun to sit and think what type of song I would write for a particular scene in a movie or subjects that really scare me. So instantly that my mind goes to like horror films and things like that. So, while the nature of those songs contain personal subject matter, what other elements do you draw inspiration from? Like, are there horror films that like you just you write the songs from, or do you imagine a scene from writing? Like, which way does it
Yeah,
work? I don't know if
that's
that
a
made sense.
no, good question. I mean, I actually, it's different. It's different ways that all works itself in. But for example, I just finished up a series called Midnight Mass, and that
Ah,
show very much about all of this, about the darkness of religion and how it can be a really negative thing if used in the wrong way. And the whole time I was sitting and thinking about the soundtrack to it, that there were some great moments in that, but there were some things I would have done differently. So maybe in that way I'll go and sit with my guitar and I'll think, okay, if I were going to rewrite the music to that scene, what would it sound like? What song would I write to go right there? Sometimes I'll turn off the sound to a horror film and just watch it and see what feels like would be here, just to spark a little bit of creativity. And furthermore, during COVID, I actually decided to finish my degree in film scoring. So we did a
wow.
whole interesting things like having a movie that has music in it already, and then you strip the music from it and you rewrite all of that, and you have to line it up and put it in with the scene and all of that. But there's more technical ways that I write songs that are more like that. But also sometimes, like for example, with this TV show that I just watched, I might sit and think about, well, what was the point of that? What is a line that I took from that show that really moved me to write a song that I would put that in, a song. I read As I Lay Dying about 6 months ago, and ended up, of course, having to mull that book over quite a lot after reading it. But ended up writing a couple songs just from that book, of the imagery and the story, and what music would I put in that movie, that kind of thing. So horror is a really, really influential thing for me, especially when done right. I mean, for me and for anyone who's into horror, it's such a particular thing. So I'm into certain kinds of horror. I tend to like things that have quite a lot of meaning behind them. But yeah, so for me, I that's how I kind of take a movie and rewrite the music to it, or even come up with a song that would be fitting for that.
Sure.
So
Sure. That's really cool. And like I said, I am a huge horror fan. I have seen that series, Midnight Mass. It's actually really amazing.
it is. It's,
The guy who plays the main character he was born to play that role. I mean, he was so good in that.
man, he
Uh,
was so good. He was, that character. I've thought about him a lot and what the meaning was behind, all of that character. And was he a good guy? Was he a bad guy?
mhm.
And so those kind of horror series that are light on the horror and heavy on the storyline, I feel are really some of the best ones, because it really lends itself to a lot of creativity, in filming and in the music. And I did personally feel like the soundtrack to it was maybe not how I would have approached it. Some of it was really cool, but yeah, that for me has always been a really big source of energy and creative energy for me, is watching movies and thinking about how I would do the scoring for it, or TV shows, of course, as well. So
Sure. What's some of your like go-to horror movies?
one of my favorites is always going to be 28 Days Later or 28 Weeks Later. I think the soundtrack to that's a perfect example of it being visually terrifying in a lot of ways, but also the soundtrack being phenomenal,
Mhm.
and it's just a really good soundtrack, in my opinion. Maybe not everyone would agree with that. And again, like you take a movie like The Sixth Sense, I mean, that's a really deep dive into something that's really scary, but it's not so scary that you can't watch it,
Mhm.
And even during different times of the year or whatever, I'll find different movies. I'm like, I really love that whole thing. I'm really into like Midsummer, the way that they used the audio in that movie in Hereditary. It was really interesting for me, even more so than just the way that it was filmed. And of course, the storyline and all of that's insane. All of it's scary, terrifying. But if you really take all that away and you listen to the sounds that they're using, they're not the cheap jump scares. It's really unnerving audio that makes you scared in a way that other movies don't approach like that. So for me, I really appreciate movies like that are really either great with the storyline or really using audio with the visual in a very, very creative way.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And you took the words right out of my mouth. Like, I was just about to mention Hereditary and even Midsommar. Like,
yeah,
it's just they're very unsettling movies.
yes,
Like you said, the score that you like, even Midsommar being like shot in the daytime is the complete opposite of a horror movie, but it's still unsettling because it's done so well.
it is, and
Yeah.
it a cheap shot. They could have done that in a lot of ways that would have made it not scary at all. But it's very creative, and that for me ticks the box for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll think of some that you may have not have seen after the show,
Sure.
and I'll send you a little list, and
Yeah,
because I've seen them all.
I believe it. I do watch a lot of horror. I really am. I'm really into that at all times of the years.
Yeah, you've probably seen them just as much as me. So, but you never know. There could be one or two in there.
Oh, I'm sure that there are. Yeah.
So, is there any religion that you practice now, like any religion at all, or have you willingly practiced?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I about the age of 20, about the time I had my son, I decided that I would leave the church, as it were, and pursue the idea of unlearning every single thing that I had been taught, which it has ended up being such a long process for me. I mean, that step I really thought would take me, a little bit of time. And I thought I will go out in the world and I will, just try to be a blank slate. And when I'm touring and visiting these cities, go into these churches and just exist, and not come in with any preconceived ideas of what is truth and what is right, and go around the world and meet people and try to take in what the rest of the world believes. And as I've done that, the more that I have learned, the more that I realize I know absolutely nothing. And so I really, it's interesting looking back on it. I really thought that at this point I would find what I believe, or find, and I really haven't. I mean, even as a parent to an older kid now, I mean, a teenager that is exploring his own ideas and what is God and what is the big picture, I have no answers, and that for me is, I think, on a very basic level, that there is good and there is evil in this world. And I think that there are certain things that very deeply make me feel afraid, or make me feel like that's probably not something I want to mess with, and there are things that I can say that when I do this kind of situation unfolds in my life, if I do good, karma or whatever you call it, it typically goes in a positive direction for me. But outside of that, it's very difficult for me to say, I can commit myself to this practice or this religion, because I just have a hard time believing that anybody has figured it out. That's my, but everything is just, there's something beautiful and fulfilling about entering a church on a Sunday morning and listening to the singing and just observing people devoting their lives to something that they believe in. But for me, I couldn't continue to do that every single Sunday. It's hard to find something that I could do that every week for.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I get it. I get religion. I get the idea of it. Like, you live by these rules and these guidelines, and this is how you live your life. But I think it's way better to look at it from the outside, like you do, and say, all right, I've lived this experience. I've learned from this experience. I know what not to do now. I don't need this guidebook or these rules to figure it all out. I'm with you 100% on that. And yeah, but I also understand people need it, and whatever, that it is what it is.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, most of my family would totally disagree with what I said. I mean, but at the same time, I think for me, traveling the world as much as I have and meeting people of every walk of life, and spending time in their homes and around their dinner table and knowing them personally, you start to realize that there are so many ways to do this thing called life, and there are so many things that you can devote yourself to. And there are so many ways to do it wrong, and there are so many ways to do it right. And, very little of the people that I meet around the world are doing that right just because they are devoted to a religion or a God. I mean, there's so much good in the world that doesn't have anything to do with that. And so defining that word on a broad scale is really what interests me at this point in my life, is what is God and what happens next,
Mhm.
and outside of that, I don't think that a religious practice is for me. It's just not that I can say that from a very educated standpoint of living it and doing it, not just I haven't ever done it and I think it's not for me. I've done it and it's not for me. It's not what I believe in at this point. So while I find the good in it, and I do think there are a lot of people that benefit from it, that's one of those things for me that's not worth arguing with anybody about, because if it works for you, do it, absolutely do
Sure.
it. But for me, it would be very unlikely that I could see myself totally devoting my life to a religion at any point, because I just find that there's so much truth in so many different things.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then that's the way I live my life as well. And I think that it can be dangerous actually to make a decision based on something that was written 10,000 years ago.
I would agree. And actually, around back to that midnight mass, why I found this so interesting, because it is so it's so deep in thought, about the fact that you've got these people that are doing something that is so evil, like even to the point that they're committing murder, like Jonestown, and yet they are using scripture to say that this is okay. And I just thought, man, that's a deep dive right there, because that is exactly how I feel about it, is that there are a lot of people that just use it as a weapon, and instead of using their head and common sense and their heart and their morals, they use a scripture, a Bible verse that says, yeah, but this says I can do that,
Right.
So for me, I equate it to cults in a lot of ways. And that's another thing I find really fascinating and interesting. I've really gotten into in the last, few years, is cults. I love studying about them because it's so interesting to me that you can herd people into believing this mass idea, and it is not any different than religion. Really, when you break it down, it's really no different, So yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. And just the word cult alone has a stigma to it. Like when I hear it, you think of satanic cults or things like that. And it's just not the case. There's, every religion really, in a way, extreme religion at least, is a cult,
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, not even just things that are just in general widely popularized or something that people are really devoting their lives to. I mean, yeah, but I think the point of it is that human beings at their core are they are drawn to this idea of being in a group, following one common goal and idea, and believing that you have found some kind of purpose in your life. And at any point when somebody says they have the answer to that purpose, it can be really dangerous. We've seen that happen over and over and over again throughout time and history, but particularly with cults where it goes totally awry.
Yeah.
And you do found that happen, so that's an interesting case study on that idea.
Yeah, and I always find it funny that the people who usually are calling other people sheep are the ones who are really following something
Yeah.
else. It
Yeah.
makes no
Yeah.
sense.
I guess we all are, and really in some way, if we're really honest, we're all sort of, sheep to some extent, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, I mean, you've had some dark periods in your life, like we all have, but dealing with things like substance abuse, bad relationships. But I believe there's a difference between like a dark moment in life and actually embracing darkness in a positive way. So, could you give me any examples of when darkness gave you a silver lining in life?
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, all the time. I mean, I think, as someone who is really drawn to darkness in a way, I have to find the humor in it to some extent, and I have to find the entertainment value in it to some extent too, because I can go so far into that dark corner, of my mind that it's not a joke anymore, or it's something that is really dangerous, So for me, that's been kind of a way to dig myself out of some of those dark thoughts and whatnot, is to write about them and be creative. But yeah, I mean, even I had my son when I was 19 years old, and that was a very dark period of my life. I had no idea what that was going to look like, how that would to affect my life. Really, you can't explain that to anybody, much less a 19-year-old. So that was very daunting for me, and in a really dark period of my life where I did not know what was next for me. And that was something that was hard, that of course, it gave me beyond the silver lining. I can't imagine my life without Jackson, and he's given me so much purpose and meaning in life. And, furthermore, I mean, I would even go as far as to say I'm not sure about the silver lining part quite yet, but for me, I mean, when COVID started, I reached a level, and continue to truthfully teeter on the brink of that level all the time, of just despair. I mean, all of us, have this just global despair, and I really struggled at the beginning of COVID, because I literally felt like I had lost everything. I mean, everything that my life was built around was gone just overnight. And it was like, okay, well, shut up and stay in your house and deal with it. We've all lost a lot. Shut up. It was like that kind of reaction to it, that I'm like, how do I deal with this? What do I do? And I really had to dive deep in myself, and counseling, and all of those. I had to do grief counseling during that time, just to really suss out, like, these are my emotions about this, and it's valid, and it's okay to feel that way. And so for me, though, I have found some kind of comfort in the last 2 years, or a silver lining, in fact, of realizing that this has given me a period of time at home that I would not have ever had. I mean, I was out on the road 24/7. I was touring 150 to 200 days a year, juggling an immense amount of things in my life. And I was living in Chattanooga, which my whole family lives in Nashville outside of my mom. And my dad got really, really sick right at the beginning of COVID, with something unrelated to COVID. And that time that I got to spend at home with him and with my son and my family, it ended up working out in a way that everybody needed me home so badly. And I don't think I would have had it in me to cancel all of my tours for 2 years and do that.
Sure.
So for me, that part of it, no matter when I get to go back out and really tour and do the things that I love, I know that this will end up working out in a way that I'll look back on it and be grateful. And I am now, even, but obviously if I knew the end point of it, it would feel a little easier. But this really has been a trying time in my life, if I'm really honest. I mean, I can look back and point at a couple times in my life that were as heavy as the last 2 years. And it's been really difficult in a lot of ways. And it's required a lot of saying, you know what, I believe everything's going to be okay, for
Mhm.
all of it, for all of
Yeah.
us. So I feel like that that question is really like, I'm right in maybe the thick of one of those moments in life, and I think all of us, not all of us, but probably a lot of us, at the beginning of it, sat around and drank all day and slept all night and or all morning, and would wake up at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And initially, I think maybe all of us were very self-destructive in some kind of way, but then you realize, okay, I got to get it together, so I threw myself into healthier things. I threw myself into doing ballet again, and doing practicing my classical guitar skills and scales and things like that, and trying to think, when this is over, I want to be better than I was before and not just be a total alcoholic or a drug addict or whatever.
Right.
So it's definitely been a really good exercise in taking a dark time in my life and not just spiraling downward with it, so.
Sure. Yeah. And I talk to a lot of artists on this show, a lot of musicians, and yeah, they've had a tough time over the past couple of years, not being able to tour and do things like that. COVID reset the world. It reset everything. Like, for me, this happened because of COVID. Like, this is something I've always wanted to do. I had a business and I had to shut down the business. Business is gone. It's not coming back, but I got this out of it. And yeah, I try to find the silver linings as well and everything. It's been a crazy couple of years, and sometimes it feels like it's getting worse. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, I know. It is really a weird thing because it's, I had a situation that happened on my last tour. I just got back from in the UK, and we left for this tour. And when we left, Omicron had not even come out. So we left for the tour. I had, everything looked great. I was like, man, this looks like things are really, this tour is going to really shape up well, and it had been reset 3 times too, on top of that. And so, yeah, like we land in Sweden and start that leg of the tour. And by the time that we get to the UK, like, it is so bad that our shows are getting canceled. And I just realized in that moment, not only do I not have control, and even though I'm so type A and I'm such a control freak in so many ways, I have no control. And you have to learn that you have no control right now of any of this. And I think that whole situation forced me to have to swallow that idea that this may not happen this way anymore. This may not be a thing. It's what you just said, that's not ever coming back. I'm having to really take in that idea that what I was doing in my life prior to this may not ever come back. And that is actually part of the grieving process. That's one of the steps, is accepting it, and that for me, obviously is the most difficult part, because I think all of us go, well, the world's going to be okay again. We're going to get to go back to it. And instead of accepting that, this may be what my life is now for maybe ever, but for a very long time. And I've really had a hard time accepting that part of it. And I think when I was out on tour in the UK and all this started unraveling, I realized at any moment this could all shut down again. And I've got to understand that this is not the same anymore. These things are not the same as they were, and that's okay. And I have to be okay with that, because that opens the door for other things. I have to let those doors open to other things. Otherwise, I'm just going to be fighting this to try to, Google Docs my way through all of it and try to organize a new tour and try to email people. And, it's like, what? I'm not going to try to fight this anymore, because I feel like I'm fighting God right now,
Right.
So, I really learned a lot actually just in the last couple of months about acceptance and letting go, and how to move on, and allow good things in your life to come to you, because sometimes if you don't let go of them, then you can't allow other things to come in.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the whole world had to readapt to this.
Right.
Restaurants are like, delivering food now, just delivering food. Concerts you can watch online, just everything readapted. If I can say anything, like being home with my wife for all that time was great, having that, like, that solid time with not working 24/7, what sometimes it feels like. And we lost our dog a few years ago, last year. Wait, end of 2020. I see I'm all mixed up. So end of 2020, but we got to spend his last 6 months of his life with him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Instead of leaving him alone when we went to work. So there's all those little things that are like, all right, maybe this had to happen for this reason, you know?
Right.
Um,
Right. It definitely is something that everybody, while I've tried to step back and look at it that way and tried to be grateful and, positive and whatever, there's many, many days that I'm just like, man, fuck this. I don't want to do this anymore. I mean, it is just, it's a roller coaster of emotion when your whole life and dreams is not, for you, I'm sure you understand, it's not just your career, not just everything you poured your guts into, it's your dreams,
mhm.
so for people just to say, shut it down, you can't do that anymore, I mean, that's really hard to take in, and I guess that there's a lot of musicians out there that have, had health problems or whatever, that they've had to take that in every day of their life while they watch other people go out and tour. So I guess the only really helpful thing is knowing that everybody else is in the same boat as me, but really it doesn't matter because I'm still at my house by myself alone, irregardless of that. So it still requires a lot of work, and I really encourage anybody who's struggling with it still to do the steps of grieving and grief counseling, because that truthfully saved my life at the beginning of COVID. I don't know if I had not really dived deep into that and really gone through those processes of letting myself grieve losing all those things, I don't think that I could have survived it. Honestly, it was just too much at the same time for me. And there was other things going on outside of COVID, like my father being sick and all this. So it was a lot. And I'm grateful for those tools and skills that I learned during that time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, this isn't like making music or anything like that, but this is my creative outlet. This is where I get to talk to people, learn about them, and talk about myself a little bit, and like express things that I would normally never say. On this show, I'm very open about my past drug abuse and everything like that. And you said something very important before. You said humor. Humor is what gets me through everything. I literally just make fun of the fact that I used to do all these stupid things. And I talk about it in an open way. And people that never even knew now know because of this show without me
Yeah.
even having to tell them. And
Yeah.
it's almost like writing a song in a way.
Yeah.
Without the talent, of course.
I think it's the same concept though, as taking an idea
Yeah.
and making that is presentable to people, because I
Right.
mean, at the end of the day, writing a song, when I talk about drugs or I talk about these dark, destructive things, maybe they're not totally relatable to people, but there are people out there that can totally relate to it. And even if they can't, they can say, well, I can substitute that word in for something else.
Mhm.
And, all of us are self-destructive in some kind of way. That is the nature of the beast with being a human being. But for some, like myself, and probably yourself as well, I have a little extra knack for that, of being extremely self-destructive. And just because I am not totally going and getting high or drunk or whatever it is, I can find a million ways to be self-destructive, so that goes back to finding that core of what it is that keeps you, keeps your head in it and keeps you from going down that totally self-destructive path. And a whole nother conversation we can have someday is about how you stay sober, and how because I have totally different beliefs about that, and the same way that I have about religion. But for everyone, and for me, my path has always circled around figuring out how to not totally self-destruct. And for me, throwing that darkness and those cards that I was dealt with dark things, and having this affinity for darkness and being drawn to being self-destructive has really helped me to have something very structured, like touring, and a job that is centered around that I can say it's okay to express these things, but at the end of the day, you've got to be organized and you've got to be self-motivated to have a career, and
Sure.
not just allow yourself to live in that, if that makes any sense. I know that's kind of a lot of
Totally.
information, that's how it's worked, which was why it was really dangerous when all of that fell through for me, with COVID, when everything just started to crumble around me. I thought, well, why not just do whatever I want all the time? You know, what ramifications am I going to have? You know, I have ramifications. There's nobody that's going to tell me that I need to be somewhere or need to do anything, you know? And that was really important in that moment, to exercise those skills of saying, you know, I've got to find something productive to do with my time. And that's when I started to finish my degree, because I knew that that was not going anywhere good if I if I just sat around all day, you know. So
Sure.
that I decided to do that, you know.
Yeah. What's
So
the saying? The devil's hands or something like that. Idle hands or the
devil's somebody can help me.
playground.
Play-
Oh,
Idle
yeah.
hands, devil's playground. That's right.
It's 100% true.
It is 100%.
That's why I started this and, you know, and things like this, because you have to keep your mind going. You know, you have to talk about it and get it out there. And no matter which way you do it, whether you're writing it in a song or you literally just saying it.
Yeah.
And so for anyone listening, you know, who feels like that, like, figure out a way to say it.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you don't feel comfortable saying it, figure out a crafty way to do it, you know?
I think sometimes just saying it, like, look, you know, I'm really struggling with this, especially right now with everybody struggling with it.
Yeah.
You know, it's okay, you know, to just say to someone that you're sitting and talking to, saying, I'm having a really hard time with this, because you can be sure that the person across the table from you is also having a really hard time with it. No one is doing well with this pandemic. Right. We can all try to move forward and, you know, do positive things. But for me personally, all I can say is that, you know, doing that work immediately on the process of grieving was not something I had ever done before, because I'd never really lost anything. And it took me a long time, not a long time, but a little while, to determine that emotion that I was feeling was grief. I had no idea that's what that was, but I just knew it was this feeling inside of me, like I couldn't go on, this despair that was beyond any despair I had ever had, more than just, oh, I'm so sad over this particular thing, or, oh, I don't like life anymore. You know, it was not like that. It was different. It was this overwhelming, everything, all of the lights in the world have been turned off on me, you know. And that I finally realized that that's grief that I'm feeling. And I went through these steps of processing that. And it was tremendous for me, and a huge weight, you know, was lifted off of me. So I really encourage anybody that's feeling total despair to look at that, you know, because that was really helpful. But also, like I said, just little things like doing ballet again, because it's so structured and it gave me a positive end goal, is like, I'm going to do something that I love, but also I'm going to do something that's difficult, and something that in the end I will be more in shape, you know, or I'm going to enroll in school, because then at the end I'll be a better writer and guitar player, you know. And, you know, that for me has been really important throughout my life, with dark times and leaning into feeling real depression and being really, really self-destructive, to throw myself immediately into something that I can really distract myself with, because that has been a big part of me not totally self-destructing, if that makes sense.
Sure. No, absolutely. And that's a very important thing too. Grief doesn't necessarily have to be the loss of a person or a physical being or even an object. It could just be a dream, like you said,
Yeah.
you know, that something you built up your whole life that was just taken away. So that's an important thing for people to know too. So, but let's lighten it up a little bit. Let's get into some of the music.
Yeah.
So you're a little bit country, a little bit rock. I've listened to it all day. It's so good. It's so legit. It's legit. That's the important word there. It's so, no matter what kind of music you're into, you can tell it's real, you know?
Yeah.
So I would say, like, definitely Southern rock, dark country is kind of where it's at. Your debut Razor Wire came out 2014, Gold Rush 2017. You have a new single out called Sinking. You guys can get it wherever you stream your music. There's a video for it as well. Now this is a song originally by a band called Godhead.
Yep.
And it features the guy from, right, the lead singer, John Charles Miller.
Yeah. Jason actually is his name. Jason Charles
Jason,
Miller.
sorry, Jason.
Yeah. no, it's fine. He was the lead singer of Godhead, and yeah, that project was really interesting. We have it's a side A, side B, and actually the other side of it is a song that is about my grandfather, who was a Church of Christ preacher, and myself murdering someone, and us burying the body, and him going to church on Sunday with the dirt still under his fingernails. So that song's Ghost, and that one's on the other side of the 7-inch that I released. So yeah, it was supposed to come out in October 2020, but we ended up releasing it this October. So.
Right. Yeah, but good idea. 2020, just we erased that.
Yeah, and really get to tour behind it at all. I did this one tour, and then Omicron came out. But nonetheless, it was a really important project for me to get to release, because we started recording that project in February of 2020 out in LA. So I was like, I'm gonna release this record.
Right.
Even as the last thing I do is gonna be, I'm gonna release this record. So yeah, that was really exciting for me to finally get to put it out, because it felt in some kind of way like, okay, there is life after COVID, so.
Yeah. I mean, you've also recently released the haunting rendition of O Come Emmanuel. Super dark Christmas song. I love it.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I'm signed to a label in Sweden called Icons Creating Evil Art, and God, I just love them so much, because if there's any people on the planet that are darker than myself, with they are, so they were like, could you do like maybe a scary version of a Christmas song? I'm like, I got you, don't worry. So my dad and I in his basement in Lebanon, Tennessee, just messed around with a bunch of plugins and stuff and did a creepy version of that song. But I think there's really nothing better than a good creepy religious song. So we did that one, and kind of just messed around with some other stuff, and I've actually been writing a project as well that I hope will be out this year, but who knows? I don't want to say any dates at this point about anything, but we've writing it and working on recording it. So
all right, very cool. And also recently a live album called Hannah Aldridge Live in Black and White. I listened to that one on repeat today. I really like that one.
Thank you.
And I'll tell you why, because obviously you have an amazing voice, you make amazing music, but when someone does a live album, it really separates the true artist from the studio trick artist.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I don't like studio trick artists. I do. But I've seen some bands that I love live and they're horrible. Which, whatever. It is what it is. But when you can do both, that's a true artist to me. And I was actually going to ask you about that label. Icons Creating Evil Art is a Swedish label. You're in Nashville. How did that happen?
That's a long story. But to make it short, I started touring over in Sweden, and at some point just found that my whole band and everybody that I worked with was over in Sweden. And then there was a guy that was working with a touring company that I was originally signed with, that left that touring company and opened up his own touring company. And when he did that, he said, I would love to have you on my roster. And furthermore, there's this label that I've been working with named Icons Creating Evil Art that I think would actually be a great fit for you. And up until that point, I had really struggled to find a label that understood what I was doing as an artist, because it's very easy to take my music and put it in the Americana box. But the problem with that is that the Americana world is not really into, that dark, doomy country stuff. That's not really their bag. So it was really hard to get labels on board to figure out how to promote what I was doing in a way that I was really happy with, and it wasn't toning down any of that. So Icons, I went and met with them, and right out of the gate, I just absolutely loved them, because they were so far removed from the Americana country world. They're like, we don't know anything about that. They are a pet company of a big metal label called Despot. So their roots are in metal music and very dark rock music. So for me, that was just such a good fit, because they're bringing something to the table that's very different than what I'm bringing to the table, and we're able to sort of, patchwork it together. So that's how it, started. Was I got them on board to release the live record, and then we did this 7-inch together, and then they released the Christmas single, and we're working on this EP together. So it's been a really cool thing for me. I've been really lucky to have them.
That's very cool. Yeah, I did wind up checking out their site before, and I was like kind of blown away by it. I was like, oh, this is really cool.
Yeah.
I want to see if I can get in touch with them and like get somebody on the show that would like represent them, or something like that. Because
they would. They're really cool people. I mean, they really. My favorite thing about them is when I went into the office for the first time. Whenever you go into record labels, it's like business office. It looks like could be a doctor's office or a dentist office or anywhere else in the world. But and it was like everybody's in there in their socks with their feet like kicked up on the table, eating a bowl of cereal, sketching out like posters, and and then there's like a music video being shot in the other room with crazy smoke coming out the door, and and some guy comes out and he's got on like full on face paint. It's just like, okay, this is interesting. But you can tell everyone that works there is really creative, and they're in the music industry. It's not just some guy that's got a degree from a music school that says, I've got a piece of paper that says that I can work in the music industry,
Right.
So I really appreciated that about them, is that they're really, really interesting people. They really are. And I'm absolutely sure one of them would love to be on the podcast. So,
oh man, that'd be so cool. I'm going to give it a shot. And yeah, that's the kind of things I really love. I'm attracted to those kind of things. That's what I try to do on this show, is get people who kind of do what they do because they love to do it.
Yeah.
Not because of what's popular or how popular they can get, but for the love of it, whatever that art may be. So yeah, there was actually a movie I watched last night on Netflix called Sparks Brothers. Have you seen it?
Oh, I haven't.
Watch that documentary, because it's kind of mind blowing that I've never heard of this band. No one's ever heard of this band. It almost looks like a mockumentary, like it's a fake band, but they're huge. They've made like 25 albums. And
we're in the US.
They for some reason seem very European, and it must be their frame of mind, like their attitude, but they're from California.
Okay.
And they've been doing it since like the 60s, and they're still doing it. And they never made a hit. They have.
I love that. That's great. I mean, because that really means you really, really love what you've never, had any real monetary success as something you need to get up every day and do it. And touring in particular, because let me tell you, it looks like it's really glamorous and fun. And some days it is. There are some days that you're like, is this really my life right now? Like, do I really get to do this and get paid for it? But it's just like any other job, because about 6 days of the week, it's really difficult work. And maybe one day it's like, okay, this is all right. I can do this, except for the differences in touring is people are applauding you for your job, which doesn't happen really at any other job. But it takes a special kind of person to want to commit their entire life to touring. You have to be so nomadic, and you have to really, really believe in what you're doing and love what you're doing, because that is not an easy thing to do. I can tell you, it's, it wears you out to be out on the road. Yeah,
absolutely. I really think you would appreciate this. And Edgar Wright made it, who made like,
oh, cool.
Last Night in Soho and Shaun of the Dead.
That's cool.
It's really cool. Check it out. So we're going to wrap it up in a few. What's on your record player right now? What are you listening to? I mean, not literally the record player. If you have like CD or whatever you got.
Let's see. Well, like just today, what am I listening to? Or like what I'm really into right now?
What you're really into right now?
Let's see. Right now, well, recently I've been going back and revisiting all of the Gillian Welch, Dave Rawlings, all of their side projects, all of that, because I really love them a lot, which is not something that a lot of people expect. But I really, really love them a lot, and the technicality that they have. I had a friend that actually was showing me a band named Big Thief recently that I really have gotten into them quite a lot. They're actually a little bit in that vein, but it took me a little while to wrap my head around what they were doing, but I've gotten really, really into that band as well. The songwriting and the musicality and kind of, it's kind of progressive folk, which is interesting to me. That's been something that I've been really into. I really, really have loved Courtney Marie Andrews' new record as well. This year, I feel like I've kind of scaled back my really heavy rock and listened a little bit to more organic singer-songwriters. I
Mhm.
feel like the year before that I was listening to only like Tool and Nine Inch Nails and all this, like, and I do still listen to a lot of that kind of stuff, but I've really kind of stripped back and started to delve a little more into, some of the really great songwriters, like even learning a really good appreciation for Leonard Cohen, and kind of
Mhm.
taking his entire body of work and diving into it, going, okay, blank slate, let's just listen to this, Warren Zevon,
Sure.
people like trying to really break down what it is that makes them who they are as a writer. And so that's really kind of what I've been up to musically lately. But in terms of a band that I have discovered in the last little bit, I really love Big Thief. I think they're really great. And my friend has great musical taste. So, there's been several bands that he's recommended to me that I've really loved. But this particular one was interesting because he just gave me tickets to go see them play at the Ryman. And I'd never even heard of this band before. And I was like, I don't even know what to think when I left, when I left the show. But I kind of dove into their back catalog whenever I got home, and really, it's been really, really cool to listen to all their stuff. I definitely recommend that band. And again, like I have really enjoyed going back and revisiting Gillian Welch and Dave Rawlings' side projects and all of their music as well, because I just think they're some of the most incredible players and songwriters.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah,
I'm gonna write that down. Big Thief.
yeah,
Um,
they're like prog folk. If you're into prog music, which I've got my Mars Volta shirt on, so
yeah.
obviously that genre is.
Yeah.
But they're kind of people who are into prog and or into maybe folk or light rock would probably appreciate this band. I think they're kind of no frills kind of thing, but they're really pretty cool. So
I'm definitely interested in that because I'm like that too. I listen to so many different genres, from black metal to like easy listening, it just depends on my mood, but I always tend to go back to like folk and things like that.
mm,
Simple, like simple guitar, simple songwriting, but just good, just done well. It's like raw. It's like the basis of music, like somebody like Ryan Adams,
yeah, yeah,
or
yeah,
like I don't know, I don't even know, like Nick Cave. I mean, he's a little crazy sometimes, but it's just simple, like
yeah.
straight to the point,
You know,
uh,
might like that I discovered him opening for Patty Griffin actually, which was really bizarre in Sweden, but I'm gonna botch his last name so badly, but it's something along the lines of Christian Kilvanger.
okay.
Shilvander. Anyways, something KJ is the second letter of it, and you'll find it if you search Christian Kilvanger with the J. But
Okay.
I think he's incredible, and if you're into Nick Cave or you're into, he sounds a little like some of that soundscapey stuff more of Nick Cave. He's really, really a cool songwriter though, and he's got this deep baritone voice. And he does not ever have a chorus to any of his songs. It's one of those things that's really like cinematic and soundscapey. I love his stuff. Like he's
Yeah,
not very here, but if you like doomy stuff and the rock at all, he's pretty cool. I really, really enjoy his music. I think you should check him out because I think you probably like him based on what we've talked about.
very cool. Yeah, I just wrote it down. I'm definitely gonna check that out.
Yeah.
So where can people find you online? What's your like, your prime destination, like
Now,
Instagram or
I would normally tell you that they should go to my Facebook fan page, but somebody hijacked it like 2 months ago or maybe a half ago and deleted it, and it's gone. I have no Facebook fan page anymore, and I'm so sad that I want to start a new one. I'm speechless about it.
oh
Like literally
no.
sign on to it one day. I'm like, I don't have a fan page anymore. It's gone. And I've been trying to get it back. So I don't know if anybody out there knows anything about page, please let me know because it's gone.
That's crazy. I did look for you on Facebook because I promote on there too. So I like to tag everybody and I couldn't find you at all.
Ever need to get in touch with Facebook, you can't. Just don't even
no.
bother.
No.
There is no number in Facebook.
No.
So yeah, I would normally say that. So I would say Instagram. I try to post quite a lot on there, especially in light of not having a Facebook. And then of course you can find me on all of the, Spotify and Apple Music and all that kind of stuff. But to stay in touch with me and see what I'm up to, Instagram. I try to post every day just so, people can see what I'm up to. And he's on there quite a lot. So
very cool. Now, besides the streaming stuff, can people buy some physical stuff? You have Bandcamp?
Bandcamp. Yep. That's the best way to do that. You can find, actually Icons has a Bandcamp set up for me, and I have hannahaldridge.com as well. So you can get the 7-inch and some cool little bags that have snakes and apples on them and things like that. So lots of nice religious things to take to church on Sunday. So
that's very cool. I'm going to check that out for sure.
Yeah.
All right.
Definitely found me there.
Very cool. One more question before we go. I asked this, ask everybody this, on a scale from 1 to hell fucking yeah, how much did you enjoy being here today?
Oh, hell fucking yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, too. Both of us say up.
That's great. I never had a dog do it, and now I feel like my life's kind of complete, honestly.
Yeah. You have Ozzy's comes out. He said it was the hell.
Oh my God, that was great. Yeah, we'll keep in touch. This was great. And I always meet such great people, from Lucy
great
PR.
to chat, man. It was really, really great. Yeah. And definitely get in touch with Icons. I'm sure one of them would love to be. So
yeah, definitely. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's no problem.
Hannah, have a great night. Thank you so much. All right.
Thank you so much. I'll see you later.
Take care. Bye-bye.